Hello, welcome back. My name is Sophie from Mingo Studio and we are back with another alcohol marker tutorial video today. We're going to be using Ohuhu's new Honolulu Plus series of alcohol markers to be making this drawing. This particular set has 36 colors in it and I really do like the range here. We have a lot of yellows, quite a few blues and grays, but I think that even though the set is quite small, it does have the full rainbow in it, and it was definitely enough colors for me to make this particular drawing. Each pen has one chisel nib and one brush nib, but what makes it a little different from the normal alcohol markers from Ohuhu is that the texture is a little different. It's like, instead of being more smooth, it's a little bit more rubbery, and honestly the texture is kind of fun to play with in comparison to their normal set. It definitely works a little differently when you're using it, but I think they're very fun and really do recommend them. So we're gonna have a lot of fun today using them to make this drawing. And as you can see from the sketch that I'm outlining right now, we're going to be drawing a cow. And I'm not gonna lie, as I was sketching, I was a little nervous. Like, I was on FaceTime with my sister and I was showing her the cow and I was like, it looks a little scary. It does. But this video is kind of a trust the process one, because even though I was a little nervous going into it, I think the final result turned out super cute and I wanna help you guys through it in case you want to recreate it. Now, I would say that this is probably an intermediate level drawing just because I had some struggles with making it look accurate as far as the anatomy goes, as far as the shading, because not only is a cow not something that I draw very often, and I assume that not many of y'all are very frequent cow drawers, but also because this particular drawing, if you saw the thumbnail, the cow in the image is backlit, which means that the light is coming from behind the animal. So there will be a lot of rim lighting, aka a lot of highlights around the edge of the body where the sunlight is coming around from the back, and then the front of the body will be in shadow because it is away from the sun. But we will talk about that more later in the video. I just want to keep in mind that if this looks a little more difficult, I do understand it's a little harder. Maybe go back and watch our last video with the Ohuhu where we drew a landscape. That was very beginner friendly, I feel. It was a lot of just scribbling and fun colors, and I think it was a lot more beginner friendly. But nevertheless, if you think that this painting looks fun, or drawing I guess, looks fun, I recommend you do try recreating it, because I bet you could do it more than you think you could. I bet you could probably accomplish this if you put your mind to it. Now, the sketchbook I'm using here is also from Ohuhu. It is a mixed media sketchbook, and it's nice because the paper is super thick. Now, alcohol markers will bleed through any paper. Pretty much, even if you use watercolor paper, which is 300 GSM, very thick, it will bleed through. I'll put on the screen how thick the paper of this sketchbook is, but the sketchbook does come with this protector page, which you can put in between your pages. So basically, this helps the alcohol marker from bleeding onto the second page. So although once I finish this drawing, I will have remnants of the color on the back of this page, it won't go on to the next page, if that makes sense. So if you get a journal from Ohuhu, they almost all come with these protector pages, which I think is so helpful to make sure that you don't ruin your next page in your sketchbook whenever you're drawing with alcohol markers. Because personally, I love using alcohol markers a lot, and I want to make sure that all of my sketchbook pages stay nice and pristine. All right, so I didn't talk much about the sketching process because, to be honest, for me, sketching is just looking at an inspiration picture and trying my best to replicate it. It's very hard to explain, and also this video isn't about sketching, it's about the alcohol marker process. So I would just recommend, using reference picture when you are sketching, and then of course going over everything with fine liner. And I also tried to add a lot of texture with the fine liner. If you can see, there are marks along the cow's leg to indicate fur, and there's little details in the grass next to it, things like that. But going into the coloring, I will talk a lot more about this technique because honestly, I was also experimenting a lot as well and using the reference pictures a lot here. So I started out with the gray. I used 2 different shades of warm gray to add some shadows. Now, this is technically the white part of the cow. The cow is white with brown spots, so technically the grays are representing the white part, but because, like I said, the cow is in shadow, or at least the front part of the cow is in shadow, it is going to be darker than just plain white, which is why we're using gray here. And it looks very dark, but when I go in and add the rest of the brown, it will kind of even out, I promise. So now, again, with the brown, I'm starting with the ears and the face. Now, as you can see, I actually used a bright orange, and this is supposed to represent the sunlight peeking around the edge. Like I said, rim rim lighting, right? So because the cow is backlit, you're going to see a lot of very warm light coming in from the back and the sides of the cow. From my recollection, I don't think that cows' ears are necessarily like transparent, but I do think that the skin around an ear is a little bit thinner than like the skin that you would see like on the side of the animal. So you can definitely see a lot more light shining through the ear, which is why there's a lot of orange around the edges of the ear, both the top and the bottom. And then you can also see, especially along the back of the cow, I'm using a lot of orange and yellow before I get into the brown. And I also am leaving quite a bit of white space. The light was so bright on the cow's back that it was completely white. You couldn't even see the brown or the white, I guess, part of the cow. So I left a lot of gaps on purpose. This is supposed to be the rim lighting. And then before the gaps of white hit the brown, I'm blending it in with yellow and orange to make it, again, seem like there's a lot of sunlight coming in behind him. Or maybe her. Is this cow a girl or a guy? I don't know. What do you guys think? I mean, there are horns. Don't guy cows have horns? I don't know. Obviously, I'm not very educated in cows, but that's all right. It's just a drawing. So now I'm adding in more shadows with the brown, and this is where it really starts to contrast from the gray. This is where the gray turns out to really look like a darker shade of white instead of a dark gray, because the dark brown contrasts it so well and makes it seem not as dark. At least the gray doesn't seem as dark. Just seeing where the darkest shadows were, like under the layers of fat on the legs, around the neck where there'd be a lot of shadow, under the ear, that kind of thing. Also towards the bottom of the drawing, I wanted to keep most of the light towards the top, so I tend to keep the shadows towards the bottom. And then once I go in with the darker shade of brown, I will go back in with my lighter shade just to blend out the dark into the light and kind of create some midtones going back and forth between those two colors until the blend seems relatively smooth. It obviously isn't perfectly smooth. You can definitely see some texture in the marker streaks, especially like on the leg of the cow. But honestly, this texture lends itself to looking like fur, or I guess it's not fur. Is it hair? Is it fur? Whatever the texture is that a cow, like, I guess it is fur, right? Like the fur of a cow, like the cow, what do you call that? Basically, the marker streaks lend to looking more realistic because obviously a cow doesn't have a perfectly smooth leg. There is like hair and fur there. So yeah, I used it to my advantage is what I'm trying to say here. Now I will say that the cow looks a little goofy with this very dark coloring and the light rim behind it, but adding the background in makes everything seem more realistic. So I'm pulling out multiple shades of green to do the grass behind him, and then I'm also using orange, the same color that I used for the rim lighting on the cow's shoulder, to color in the flowers here. I love using the same colors throughout my drawings, even if in real life the orange might be a little different in the shade of the flowers versus the shade of the lighting. I like using the same marker if I can because it makes the entire drawing seem more cohesive because all the colors do match. Same thing here. I'm going to be coloring in the bars of this like fence that's behind the cow in the same light brown that I used for the skin. It is obviously not part of the cow, but I think that using the same colors make the entire artwork seem more cohesive and put together with the same color palette. Now the red like stripe on the very right is supposed to be a barn. It looks very weird right now, but I will add more brown and texture in to streak it and make it look like there are woods with weathering and shadows and perhaps even little ridges. I mean, a wooden barn is not perfectly, pristine and intact. There are going to be lots of like grooves and shadows and weathering on it. And same thing goes with the roof of the barn. I used the 2 shades of brown that I used for the cow's hide to add the same kind of texture and weathering to the roof. In the top left corner, we have some trees, and I love drawing trees because they are so easy to just be messy. It's just a bunch of leaves. So just scribble with a little bit of light, a little bit of dark green, go back and forth, and it looks pretty realistic to me. And then just finishing everything out with a nice blue sky. At first, it seems a little streaky whenever you go back and forth between the blue, especially when you're using a light colored alcohol marker. But the nice thing about alcohol marker is it tends to want to blend with itself as it dries. So although it might seem a little streaky, if you go over it once or twice while it's still fresh, while it's still a little wet, it will dry pretty solid. Water-based markers are great, but water-based markers tend to show their streaks a lot more, whereas alcohol markers really don't, which is why I love them. So this, I think, really finishes out the color here. Last thing I'm gonna do is pull out a white gel pen and add a lot more highlights. So this is where I'm emphasizing the rim lighting around the edges of the ears, the face, the back, the sides. This really makes the drawing pop, I think, to add these very, very bright highlights and emphasizes not only the shape of the cow from the background, but also just how strong the lighting is from the back. Obviously there is no sun in this image, but like I said, this entire video I was kind of just assuming that the light was from behind, so this is kind of helping that. And then also adding highlights to the side of the barn, the flowers, the fence behind the cow. It's not perfect, it may not even be perfectly realistic, but I love adding these little touches in my own artwork. It just kind of fits my style, and I think it looks really, really cute. So with that being said, the drawing is pretty much done. So while the finished piece may look a little bit more complicated than you guys think, and again, it is an intermediate drawing, I would say, I do think that if you work through it slowly and just follow the steps and use your reference sheet, you can really create something very similar to this. I hope you enjoyed this video. As always, subscribe to Ohuhu's channel, and if you want to follow me, my @ is Mingo Studio. All of Ohuhu products will be linked in the description box below for you to go check out. And with that, I will see you guys in the next video very soon.